The winner is John Wayne in True Blood.
John Wayne. The name itself isn't just a name, it's a symbol. It brings to mind the rugged American frontier and a lone hero standing tall against impossible odds. For decades, he was the undisputed king of Hollywood, the very picture of American strength, grit, and masculinity. From the sweeping landscapes of The Searchers to the battlefields of sands of Iwo Jima, his presence on screen was massive. He was the Duke, an icon whose calm voice and signature walk defined a whole generation of cinema. For over 30 years, John Wayne was one of the biggest box office draws in the world. He starred in around 170 films, produced, and even directed, building an empire that seemed as vast and solid as the Monument Valley landscapes he so often rode through. He wasn't just an actor, he was a brand, an American institution. He lived in a huge waterfront mansion in Newport Beach, owned a massive ranch in Arizona, and vacationed on a 136-foot converted minesweeper yacht called the Wild Goose. To the public, he was the definition of success, a man whose wealth had to match his colossal fame. He was a symbol of rugged individualism, a hero who always won in the end. So, it was natural for everyone to assume that when he died, his family would be left with a fortune of unimaginable size. The press, his fans, and even his own family were bracing for an estate that would rival the titans of industry. They expected a will that would cement his legacy, a final testament to a life lived on an epic scale. The stage was set for a simple story, a Hollywood king passing his kingdom to his heirs. But the story of John Wayne's fortune is anything but simple. When the will was finally read, its contents wouldn't just divide his assets, they would divide his family. The document held secrets, snubs, and shocking twists no one saw coming. It painted a picture not of a unified family inheriting a kingdom, but of a fractured dynasty left to deal with a legacy far more complex and contentious than his on-screen heroics ever suggested. The reality of John Wayne's estate was a tangled mess that would take years to unravel, exposing the deep cracks just beneath the surface of America's most iconic family. Hook John Wayne, the American icon who symbolized strength and ran Hollywood for decades. He was one of the highest-paid actors of his time, a true empire builder. So when he died, everyone expected his family to inherit a massive fortune. But the reality was a whole lot messier. His will revealed a fortune of just under $7 million, a shockingly small sum that raised immediate questions. And in a stunning twist, his wife of over 20 years was cut out completely. What came next was a story of a sealed mansion, hidden deals, and a bitter family war that threatened to tarnish the Duke's legacy forever. What secrets were hidden in John Wayne's will, and why was his family left fighting over the pieces of his fortune? Section 1. The legend and the expectation of wealth. To get why the world was so flawed when John Wayne's will went public, you have to understand the sheer scale of his legend. This wasn't just some movie star. This was a cultural phenomenon. Born Marion Morrison in a small Iowa town, his transformation into John Wayne was pure Hollywood magic. After a body surfing accident torpedoed his football scholarship at USC, he started working as a prop boy at Fox Film Corporation. It was there that director Raoul Walsh spotted him, cast him in his first lead role, and gave him the legendary name, though his first big movie, The Big Trail, flopped. Wayne spent the next decade grinding it out in dozens of low-budget westerns, slowly crafting the persona that would make him a star. The big break finally came in 1939 with John Ford's masterpiece, Stagecoach. His role as the Ringo Kid made him a superstar, and for the next 40 years, he never looked back. He was a box office titan for 3 decades straight, a record very few have ever touched. His films grossed hundreds of millions of dollars back when a movie ticket costs less than $1. His financial empire wasn't just built on acting paychecks. Wayne was a smart businessman. He started his own production company, Batjack Productions, which gave him huge control over his projects and a bigger slice of the profits. He invested heavily in real estate, owning a sprawling ranch in Arizona and a magnificent waterfront home in Newport Beach, California, protected by high walls and a single electric gate. His yacht, the Wild Goose, was a former U.S. Navy he turned into a floating palace, a symbol of his incredible success. The man lived large. He was known for being generous, but also for his sharp business sense. He was a pillar of the conservative political scene, a friend to presidents, and a voice that carried serious weight in American culture. From the outside, the Wayne dynasty looked like it was built on solid gold. The public thought he had almost limitless wealth. Tabloids and magazines guessed his net worth was in the tens, if not hundreds, of millions. By all accounts, he was one of the richest men in Hollywood. So when he died on June 11, 1979, after a long public battle with stomach cancer, the world mourned a giant. But under all the grief, there was anticipation. The reading of his will was expected to be a historic event. The final chapter in the grand story of John Wayne. The press gathered, ready to report on a fortune that would make his 7 children richer than their wildest dreams. The expectation was clear. The Duke, the ultimate symbol of American success, would leave behind a monumental estate. No one was ready for the truth. Section 2. The shocking revelation. The will is read in the tense days after John Wayne's death. His family gathered to hear his final wishes. His 7 children, Michael, Patrick, Melinda, and Tony from his first marriage, and Aisa, Ethan, and Marissa from his third were all there, waiting for the last words of their larger-than-life father. His lawyer, John S. Warren, prepared to read the 27-page document that would decide the fate of the Wayne dynasty. The air was thick with expectation. As Warren started reading, the first number that came out sent a ripple of confusion, then outright shock, through the room. The total value of the estate of John Wayne, Hollywood's reigning king for nearly half a century, was estimated at $6.85 million. Now, in 1979, that was a lot of money, about $25 million today. For a normal person, it would be a massive fortune. But for John Wayne, the global superstar, it felt impossibly small. Where was the colossal fortune everyone was expecting? The estate was made up of about $1 million in real estate and $5.75 million in personal property and investments. It was a healthy sum, but it just didn't add up after decades of superstardom, blockbuster movies, a production company, and a massive public profile. This was the first crack in the perfect image of the Wayne legacy. Had he been bad with money? Were there hidden debts? Or was the story of his wealth, like his on-screen characters, just a well-crafted illusion? But the surprisingly small sum was just the warm-up act. The will contained a series of rules and exclusions that were far more personal and far more explosive. The biggest shocker was the complete and total snub of his third wife, Pilar Palate Wayne. They had been married for 25 years and had 3 children together. Although they had separated in 1973, they never legally divorced. Pilar always said they were still married when he died. Yet, the will was crystal clear. She got nothing, and it didn't stop there. While it did provide for his 7 children, it used a bizarre and cold formula. Each child would get $5,000 multiplied by their age at the time of his death, minus 21 years. For his oldest son Michael, who was 44, this meant he got $115,000. It was a strange, almost heartless equation that seemed to put a price tag on his fatherly affection. The will also made specific and sometimes pointed gifts to other people in his life. His longtime secretary, Mary St. John, received $10,000. Another secretary, Pat Stacy, who he was in a relationship with in his final years, received $30,000. He even set up a trust for his first wife, Josephine Seens, whom he'd been divorced from 4 decades. That would give her monthly payments for life. But the most personal jab was aimed at the husband of his oldest daughter, Tony. The will had a special clause that explicitly blocked his son-in-law, Donald LaCava, from ever getting a single dime from the estate. It even said that if Tony died, her share could not be inherited by her husband. The document gave no reason for this deep-seated hatred, leaving everyone to guess what the bad blood was about. The reading of the will wasn't a moment of closure. It was the starting pistol for a family feud. The modest fortune, the shocking disinheritance of his wife, the weird formula for his kids' inheritance, and the pointed snub of his son-in-law was a recipe for controversy. The document that was meant to be his final word instead opened up a Pandora's box of family secrets and resentment that would boil over into years of legal battles and public fights. Section 3. The ultimate betrayal. Why Pilar was left with nothing. Of all the bombshells in John Wayne's will, none was more stunning than deliberately cutting out his wife, Pilar Palate. To the public, it seemed shockingly cruel. Here was the woman who had been married to the Duke for a quarter of a century, the mother of 3 of his children, completely cast aside in his final act. The headlines were brutal, painting Wayne as a cold-hearted husband, delivering one last slap from the grave. But the truth was buried under layers of a complicated history, private deals, and personal pain. The core of the inheritance plan was bizarre: $5,000 multiplied by the difference between each child's age and 21. This immediately created an imbalance. His older children from his first marriage to Josephine Scene's Michael, Patrick, Tony, and Melinda got more than their younger half-siblings, Aisa, Ethan, and Marissa. For example, 44-year-old Michael received his calculated share of $115,000, while his 17-year-old half-brother Ethan received a much smaller sum. It was a system that, whether he meant it to or not, favored age and the children from his first family. Beyond this strange formula, the will gave special treatment to his 2 oldest sons, Michael and Patrick Wayne. They weren't just heirs, they were named co-executors of the estate, handed the massive job of managing their father's legacy. This was a clear nod to their involvement in his career. Michael, especially, had worked with his father for years and was the head of his production company, Batchak Productions. This gave them immense power over the family's financial future, a move that would later become a huge source of conflict. The will also set aside specific amounts for people outside the immediate family, showing a loyalty to those who had served him. His first wife, Josephine, whom he'd been divorced from since 1945, was given a trust fund that would pay her $3,000 a month for the rest of her life, a sign of lasting respect for the mother of his first 4 children. His secretaries, Mary, St. John and Pat Stacy, were also given cash, a thank you for their service and companionship. But where there was kindness, there was also hostility. The most glaring example was the clause about his son-in-law, Donald LaCava, his daughter Tony's husband. The will didn't just cut him out. It added a clause specifying that if Tony died before her father, her share was absolutely forbidden from passing to her husband. The legal language was an iron fortress built to keep LaCava out. Why this extreme animosity existed was never explained, leaving it as one of the will's most bitter mysteries. It was a deeply personal attack woven into a legal document. This selective and calculated division of wealth set the stage for a family war. It created a pecking order among the children, giving the older sons power while leaving the younger ones with less money and, more importantly, less control. Empowering Michael and Patrick as executors, combined with the resentments stirred up by the will's strange rules, created a perfect storm. The document that was supposed to settle John Wayne's affairs instead became the spark that ignited a family civil war, pitting brother against sister and heir against heir, in a fight for control of the Duke's name, his image, and the empire he left behind. For more than 30 years after his death, John Wayne's personal belongings, the actual tangible pieces of his life and legend, remained locked away, controlled by his estate. But in 2011, his family, led by his son Ethan, made a huge decision. They would open the vault. They partnered with Heritage Auctions for the personal property of John Wayne, a massive 2-day auction of over 700 of the Duke's most iconic and intimate possessions. It was a moment fans had been dreaming of, a chance to own a piece of the hero. But it was also a climactic moment for the family, a public sale of their father's legacy that would reveal its incredible value and the lasting power of his myth. The auction was a global spectacle, drawing thousands of bidders from all over the world. The items for sale were a time capsule of an incredible life. There were film scripts filled with Wayne's handwritten notes, famous costumes, career-defining awards, and deeply personal items like his driver's license and credit cards. It felt less like an auction and more like a public testament to the world's endless fascination with the Duke. The results were simply staggering. The auction pulled in a total of $5.38 million, a figure that blew past all expectations. Dozens of items sold for 2 or 3 times what was predicted, proving that the John Wayne brand was as powerful as ever. The bidding frenzy sent a clear signal that his legacy wasn't just about nostalgia. It was a highly valuable and marketable business. The item that got the most attention and the highest bid was the simple green wool beret he wore as Colonel Mike Kirby in the 1968 film The Green Berets, a symbol of his controversial but unwavering support for the Vietnam War. The Berets sparked a fierce bidding war, finally selling for an incredible $179,250, a record price for a costume hat. But that was just the beginning. The Golden Globe Award he won for True Grit sold for $143,400. The iconic eye patch he wore as the grizzled Rooster Cogburn in that same movie went for $47,800. A cowboy hat he wore in Big Jake, and the Cowboys brought in $119,500. Even his last driver's license sold for a shocking $89,625. These weren't just props. They were relics of an American icon, and fans were willing to pay a fortune to own them. The auction was a powerful turning point in the story of Wayne's estate. It proved that the surprisingly small fortune from his will was only part of the story. The real value of his legacy wasn't in his bank accounts. It was in his name, his image, and the powerful connection he had with millions of fans. The millions of dollars raised from selling his old hats and belts showed that the Wayne family was sitting on a goldmine. This realization would completely change the family's focus, turning them from simple heirs into the active managers of a multi-million brand. The auction was the moment the family business was truly born. The incredible success of the 2011 auction was a wake-up call for the Wayne heirs. It made one thing crystal clear: their father's most valuable asset wasn't his property, it was his name. This marked a new chapter for the family, a shift from just inheriting money to actively managing a hugely profitable global brand, John Wayne Enterprises. But with great profit came great conflict. The very company created to protect his legacy would become the battlefield for a series of bitter family feuds. Led by the youngest son, Ethan Wayne, John Wayne Enterprises began aggressively licensing the Duke's name and image. Suddenly, John Wayne was everywhere again. There was Duke Spirits, a line of bourbon inspired by Wayne's personal collection. There was official John Wayne clothing, coffee mugs, pocket knives, and a museum-like exhibit in Fort Worth, Texas, called John Wayne: An American Experience. The goal, as Ethan described it, was to make quality products his father would have been proud of. It was a way to keep the legend alive, and not by coincidence, generate a steady flow of cash for the heirs. This new business direction wasn't without its own problems. In a strange twist, the family's attempt to market Duke bourbon ran into a legal war with Duke University, which argued that using the name would damage its own brand. This kicked off years of legal fights over who really had the right to use the famous nickname, a battle that showed just how complicated it is to monetize a public figure's identity. More damaging, however, were the fights happening inside the family. The power structure from the will, which put Michael and later Ethan in charge of the family business, created deep resentments. In 2010, this tension finally exploded into a public lawsuit. John's daughter, Aisa Wayne, along with several of his grandchildren, sued John Wayne Enterprises, a company run by her own brother, Ethan. The fight was over the company's value. Ethan's side claimed it was worth $10.7 million, while Aisa and the others argued it was worth a much higher $15.4 million. They wanted a judge to set a fair price so they could be bought out. The lawsuit exposed the deep rifts within the Wayne clan. What should have been a private family issue became a public mess, with siblings fighting each other in court over millions of dollars. It was a sad final chapter to the Duke's legacy of family rich in history and now wealth, yet seemingly unable to find peace. The money, it turned out, hadn't brought them closer. It had driven them further apart. But alongside the business deals and legal drama, another, more noble part of Wayne's legacy was growing. Staying true to a wish he expressed before he died, the family established the John Wayne Cancer Foundation. Having lost his own battle with the disease, Wayne wanted his name to be used to help others fight it. Run by his children, the foundation became a major force in the fight against cancer, funding research, education, and patient support. It has helped train hundreds of surgeons, and it's blocked the blaze. Program has educated hundreds of thousands of young people about skin cancer prevention. This charity work stands as a powerful, positive contrast to the family's internal drama, a testament to the Duke's better angels. The story of John Wayne's fortune is a Hollywood epic, with more twists than one of his classic westerns. It's a story of a surprisingly small will that kicked off a huge controversy, a beloved wife cut out of her inheritance, and kids who became millionaires only to end up suing each other. We've seen how a pile of old movie props became a multi-million treasure chest, turning a family inheritance into a global brand. And through it all, we've seen the two sides of John Wayne himself, the public hero whose private life was a complicated mix of love, anger, and contradiction. His legacy is a complicated one. On one hand, you have John Wayne Enterprises, a profitable business that has sparked ugly family fights over money and control. On the other, you have the John Wayne Cancer Foundation, a powerful force for good that has helped countless people. The fortune he left behind has made his family rich, but it's also been a source of deep conflict. So, what do you